indeed.
They do.
I'm sorry, tons of mice. You're not allowed to talk in the chat unless you use your memes. You got to use your emotes. We want to see the emotes.
Oh man.
You got to do the bird emote if you're gonna talk about birds.
Yeah, but Anna's not here. It's not fun without Anna.
You know what? The other day I was on a different stream.
Yeah.
And there we go. There's the birds.
That's it.
Oh no, that's not. Yeah, that's it. He's using other people's emotes. Hi HR. The other day I was so disappointed in myself. I was playing Rift Tracks, and this scene came up where it was like some old Japanese animation, and they were firing. It was an old Rodan movie, and Rodan was like a pterodactyl, terrible fucking like special effects. And they fire these lasers at Rodan, and he blows up. And like, I had to put in the riff, and I put something stupid in there, right? And then as I'm watching it, I'm like, fuck. I should have used Just Birds Aren't Real. Like, I would have won that riff by a mile. And I even said it later. Like, when everybody was playing their riffs, I'm like, I should have said Birds Aren't Real. Darn it, I thought of it too late. And they're like, oh, yep, you would have won. You know, I'm like, and how did I miss that fucking softball? But anyway.
Took your eye off the ball, man.
I certainly did. I'm not a quick enough thinker for that game. So anyway, you guys ready to do the or you got more days in history? Are you?
Oh, that was it. That was all for today.
Okay. Oh, tons of mice use the Lindsay emote. Well, at least we got one of. Did I say hi to HR? If I didn't, hi HR. Good to see you. Got to think like a mice, Dutch. Yes, you do. All right. So, my 8th grade social studies teacher, Mrs. Carnopoulos, was the substitute one day, I think. Taught me things that turns out wasn't always the whole story. And after doing my own research, I found out what was. Steven Crowder was wrong. But today we're going to talk about just a topic that it's not really history, but it is because it's happened to a lot of people. So if you have crappier credit and you're buying a car, this might be of some interest to you. If you have great credit, it probably won't be of any interest to you. But there we go. There's the Mikey emote that says LOL or wow. I mean, the Haas emote, the Dutch emote, and the Lauren Hubbard emote. Those are the free ones.
Where the fuck is my emote?
I'll put you an emote on there. Yours has to be a pay emote though, because the men are free, the women are paid. Yes, I know that sounds bad, but
dirty.
But you don't get to it. There's a reason for it. People are going to want to use
the
girls emotes, and they have to be subscribers to do so. So you don't have to pay for the emote, but you have to be a subscriber to use the. This is the Mikey emote. No, it's not.
It's not very woke of you, Dutch.
Not. You're right. I should do just all new woke emotes, you know. But hey, who knows? The guys might be the girls.
Hey, hey, where'd you get that picture? That's okay. We'll revisit this argument later when we're off the air.
Which picture? Oh, yeah, we can talk about it. That's the picture that I took from your Facebook page on purpose to troll you. It's also your bin picture, by the way. I found your bin sticker, and That's the same one you used for that. So I actually got it from your bin sticker. Took a picture of my bin sticker that you sent me in the mail. All right. So we're going to talk today about secondary credit. So if you have less than stellar credit in the United States, and this is pretty important stuff to show the gouging of capitalist companies, but if you have less than stellar credit, you may be classified as someone who is subprime or secondary in the car business. Subprime is, as we kind of talked about before, the terminology that's used for mortgages, credit cards, that sort of stuff. In the automobile industry, they call it, their shorthand for it is called secondary, which basically means that your credit score is lower than what's required to get the best or prime interest rates. And a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about in the beginning here is research stuff, but as we move forward, it'll more or less be me talking about what I did for 7 years. So this is not to be confused with the secondary use of consumer credit data, which is a different thing. Also referred to as secondary credit, though. Now, that particular secondary credit, just so that people knows what that is occurs when the originating end user, which would be like a lender or a broker, provides the consumer credit report or any portion of your credit report to a third party. So, like, you run your credit with Tim, Tim sells it to Mikey, right? That would be secondary credit also, but a different kind. So it's usually like a sponsoring lender. Also adding the confusion is the use of the terms primary and secondary credit in economic theory. As I'm sure you guys know, specifically in the bank credit theory of money held by MMT and NCT proponents, as well as many Keynesians who say that credit creates deposits and not the reverse, where they say that primary credit creates fiat money and secondary credit lends on such money. So those are also called secondary credit, but not the ones we're going to talk about. Okay. So for this dig, we're using the term secondary credit to refer to subprime, or how a consumer with poor credit rating is handled by lenders within mostly the car business. Lenders consider the subprime borrowers to present some level of risk compared to prime borrowers. This includes a higher likelihood of carrying high balances on their credit cards and missing payments. As a result, subprime borrowers or secondary borrowers often receive unfavorable terms on credit cards, loans, other financial products that can add up to high costs over time. This makes it, of course, harder to get rid of debt. It makes it harder, of course, to improve your credit score. This little tidbit is about credit cards, and I think it's interesting. According to CNBC, subprime borrowers or secondary borrowers on credit cards have an average of 7.5 delinquent accounts per person, which is more than double the national average of 3.6. And many subprime accounts have overdue balances. Also, according to CNBC, the Total Visa card is one example of a subprime credit card that comes with steep fees. Here's an example of those fees. These are outrageous. So you sign up for the Total Visa card. Tim goes out and applies for that card. He pays a one-time program account opening fee of $89.
What? That's bullshit.
Then he pays a $75 annual fee the first year, $48 after that.
God.
Then he pays a monthly service fee of $625 per month. So the first year you have the Total Visa card, you'll wind up paying $164 in fees. The second year, $123 in fees, which is a hefty amount to pay for a card with no rewards and an extremely high 34.99% APR.
34%.
Yes. However, there are select subprime cards that have no annual fee and can help you rebuild your credit through on-time payments. Okay, so that's not every card. What is classified as secondary credit depends on a lot of factors, but is mostly based on one's credit score with one of the major bureaus. Most people know this: Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, a combination of these for mortgages. It's changed through the years. A 700 score back when I used to do this was considered great, but now, according to Credit Karma, falling under the good category. However, in general, especially in the auto credit industry, a score of 650 or higher is usually going to get someone to qualify for a primary loan, but you might not qualify at the best rate. So what I mean by that is this: let's say you go into like Nissan and they have 0%. Okay. You're a 650, you'll still get bought by Nissan and they won't send you to like Capital One, which would be a secondary lender, but they'll give you like 1.9. Right. That's just a generalized example. So a score under this, especially under 600, is definitely going to go to a secondary lender. There's a wide range of possibilities for secondary credit. In some cases, such as with Capital One, higher end secondary may get a decent rate on one of the maybe the high single digits or low double digits, like 8.9, 10.9, and usually requires what are called STIPs. So if you ever wonder why a dealership is asking you for stipulations to close the loan on a car, you might need paycheck stub, utility bills, etc. Any idea why they might want to see your paycheck stub or your utility bill, Tim?
Because they're capitalist assholes.
That's not specifically the reason, but you're on the right track.
Because they want to know where you fucking live.
That's exactly right. They want to make sure they know where to come to get their car.
Yeah.
The paycheck stub part is so they can qualify you for the loan, but the utility bill is specifically asked for so they know where to go. Again, higher down payments are also usually required, and nowadays proving insurance is something you need for everybody, but back then it used to be just bad credit. But deeper secondary lenders can put consumers in very, very poor situation. Now, I was in the auto sales industry for almost a decade. I worked at a bunch of different dealers. Some of them literally gouge customers, and yes, I gouge customers. Okay?
For shame, Dutch. For shame.
I need the shame bell on this.
I was a car salesperson at a secondary store, and like these guys were so unethical.
What's it gonna take for me to get you in this 1997 Saturn View?
Yeah. Did you slap any cars?
I have this on video cassette. I actually was in many infomercials.
Oh God, we need to see all of these infomercials immediately.
I have all of them.
I'm on it.
Well, I don't have all of them. I have some of them. There are some that are lost forever, but I have probably 4 of the infomercials that I was in, and I starred in those infomercials with none other than Nick Solozzi.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
I have no idea who that is.
You know who Nick Solozzi is, Mikey?
No, I just said no.
Oh, if you're older, you would know. Solozzi Edelson Chevrolet Cadillac in Elmhurst, where you always save more money. So we'll probably get sued for saying you always save more money.
What are they gonna do?
He was a
take all of our riches.
Yeah, they're all dead now. So, but they literally, like, you could not say you always save more money unless you were one of those 2 guys.
We got Anna on the show.
Chicago market.
We got Anna on the show. He can try it.
So a couple of things that these dealerships would do that were unethical. And this part I had nothing to do with, but they would go to local churches, generally black churches, recruit the deacons and the pastors to come work as car salesmen and to bring their congregation to that dealership to buy the car from the pastor at ridiculous prices. The program that that they called the program at the place, one of the places where I worked, which was a place called Curry Motors.
Hey, let's not name names, shall we? Legal man.
What are they going to do? They've been out of business for decades.
Oh, okay.
Well, the old man Curry is long dead.
Old man Curry
probably didn't have any kids.
But the name of their program was Blessed with a Ride. Right? So you can imagine, like, they would come and they'd pray over the car, and it was this whole thing.
I'm praying a warranty will magically appear for this vehicle.
Some of the common scenarios, you're not far off. Some of the common scenarios.
Pray that the undercoating stays on and intact for these cold Chicago winters.
So that's actually sort of a misconception, though. It's like we would not sell people. People with poor credit could not buy a beater car unless they were buying it from like one of these like there was a couple of dealerships out in the suburbs in like Glendale Heights that you might be able to go buy like a real beater, like they'd get a car for like $5 at auction and sell it to you for $2,000 and then do it like in-house financing where they literally bought the car for $2. Like I know that sounds unbelievable, but they would easily be able to do this over and over again. They'd buy a shitty car that barely runs for like $2. They'd sell it to you for $2,000 because you have to have a car. You'd make payments of like $300 a month for like a year, right? So if you made one payment, they've already paid for the car, right? So those things did happen, but that's not normally what would happen in secondary credit. What normally would happen is you would have to buy a car that was relatively late model, like within the last 4 years old, because the bank was not going to buy the loan unless they felt like the car was going to run for a while. Because the last thing that the bank would want is for you to buy a car that's going to break down 6 months in because they know you're not going to finish paying the bills, right? So, but a lot of the scenarios that we would see customers come in with would be people who were in a hard place. Recent bankruptcy, recent repossession, recent divorce, new credit, low score, maybe buyable, but higher score, not so much scenario. So these were some of the situations when people would come in with. They'd be in a car that they'd be upside down on. So like they'd say, oh, you know what, I bought this Camaro and, I can't afford the payment. So we'd like trade them out of the Camaro and put them into like literally like a Cavalier and find something to bury all of that inequity in it. But what is important here is the deal structure, because the deal structure of this is really, really dirty. And over the years, as I've thought about it, it's become something that has weighed heavily on my conscience. How this basically would work is, and I'm going to give you guys just like a sort of rudimentary understanding of the car business here. You're probably all familiar with the fact that cars have a bank value, right? They have like a trade-in value. So they have two different values. Kelley Blue Book pretends to be a trade-in value, but they don't really write checks for cars, so they don't really count in the industry. They use something usually called Black Book. So it's got a trade-in value, and it would either be like excellent, good, fair, or garbage. Most of the time they would try to buy a car at fair value, and fair meaning fair condition, not fair price. So, and then you had a bank value, right? So the bank would say, this is how much we would buy. Are willing to give a loan for on this particular car. And the banks also understood that once in a while, somebody would be rolling over a little bit of inequity from another car. So most of the time they would give you like, if let's say the car was worth $10,000, that was the book value on the car, they'd give you a loan on it for $11,000, like about 110% of the value. And they would do this so that you could finance the taxes and, or maybe a little bit of inequity that you could roll over from a different car to get you to trade it in. So most banks were comfortable with giving you a loan of about 110% of the value of a car. Super great credit, you could do like 130, but with secondary, it was usually 100 to 110%. So here's where the structure would begin. So let's say Mikey came into the dealership and he's a rat. He hasn't paid a bill in his life. And he's like, hey, I want to buy this car. So first of all, he would come in on an advertisement for like, in the black community, they'd often put out like Chargers and Chrysler 300s and stuff like that back in the day, Cadillacs. They'd put an ad out in the community that would be for a car that didn't really exist. It's called the bait and switch. So when people would call for this car, they would say, is that car here? And we'd be like, yeah, it's here. And then when they'd get there, you'd say, oh man, someone just bought it like 5 minutes ago. Because technically bait and switch would be illegal, right? So
and this is why no one likes car salesmen.
It is.
Explains a lot.
It is. So Now, the dealership that I worked at, they did not do it the illegal way when it came to that. They always had that car there. But they would have like some condition like saying that they couldn't sell, that you would, it was your job to switch them off of that car because they had actually gotten sued for it, I think. So they stopped doing the lying and they more did like this, the car's over here, but like, the tires are all bald and they put like bad tires on it or like a burn hole in the seat. So people would get there and be like, oh yeah, I don't want that car. Right. So the idea was always to switch someone to a car where it booked for a lot more than they owned it for. So one of the things that they would do in the community is they would buy a lot of repos. So if there's repossessed cars that are coming back for whatever reason, the bank's going to sell those, try to get some of their money back. So you might be able to buy say like a Cadillac DHS was a popular car that we would sell. It booked pretty good. So you'd be able to buy the DHS for, say, I'm just going to use easy numbers here. You'd be able to buy it for 10 grand, but it booked for 15. Okay. So there's $5,000 in profit already. Bought it 10, sell for 15. But when Mikey comes in to buy the car, he comes in and he has let's say a poor credit score. He has a recent divorce or something like that. He'll go through this soon enough once his wife realizes what she's gotten herself into.
Watch your mouth.
We're dealing with future Mikey here.
Watch your mouth.
But so Mikey comes in, he's like, hey, I want to buy this car. So I would switch him to something else. He'd see this DHS. He'd be like, hey, yeah, I really like that car. Let's do it. So at that point in time, you would start building the deal. And this is the part where it gets really, really crazy. I would ask Mikey a couple questions. I'd be like, okay, well, how much do you want your payment to be? He'd say, okay, well, I want it to be this. Let's say Mikey said he wanted his payment to be, he can afford $400 a month.
Shit.
For
one car? Hell no.
And then I'd ask Mikey, well, how much money down do you have? Almost always the answer would be $500 or $1,000. Once in a while, somebody would come in and they'd be like, oh yeah, I got $3,000 down. But generally speaking, you're dealing with folks who have poor credit and they probably have their whole paycheck, $500 to $1,000. So the first thing that you'd have to do is you'd have to get them to somehow come up with a minimum of $2,500 down payment. There was no way that some of these lenders were going to that dealers could work this way with would buy, like Drive Financial, for example, which is another defunct company. Not to be confused with the new Drive that you see on commercials for on TV. That's completely different. This was a Chicago-based company. You'd have to have $2,500 down. That was like the minimum that they would take. Maybe $2,000, but generally $2,500. So the deal structure for Mikey would look like this. I would take his paycheck stub. I would figure out what he qualifies for, the maximum amount of money that he would qualify for. That would be his payment. So I would take, his paycheck stub, and let's say that he would budget. If I budgeted 30% of his paycheck stub, that means that he budgeted for a car that was $550 a month. So I know that the bank will buy anything up to $550. So that's my target. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the book value of the car, the loan to value ratio of the car, which was, again, as I said, was $15,000 on this pretend car that we own for 10. And that is going to be the amount financed to the bank. So the way that we would build the deal is you would start with the loan to value ratio and add the down payment of the customer to it, not take it away. So if Mikey had come in and said he had $4,000 down, his selling price would be what?
Adjusted to reflect that. Yes. Go ahead.
Huh? What? Who?
So, all right. So I'm going to give you this example again, Tim. So I want you to pay attention here. Mikey comes in. The book value of the car is $15,000. Mikey has $4,000 down. What's the selling price?
$1, Bob.
Got to pay attention to this. You must have good credit. Okay. So what it would end up being is $19,000. So you would take the book value of the car and whatever Mikey's down payment is. Now, if Mikey was putting down $15,000, then at that point in time, it becomes a little bit obvious. So you'd probably go halfway, right?
I could buy 15 $1,000 cars. That sounds like way more fun.
That's true though. The $15,000 cars would probably last you 15 days. But
what if 15 days it would be? Be a venture every time I left the house.
I thought you had a red car yesterday. Now you got a green car.
I don't know.
But, so like if Mikey came in and had $2,000 down, the selling price is $17,000 because it's 15 plus the down payment. If he had $3,000 down, then the selling price is $18,000. If he has $4,000 down, the selling price is $19,000.
My wife is an accountant for just this reason.
What's that?
Right.
I said I married an accountant for just this reason. I don't have to worry about math.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Most of these folks that weren't married to an accountant, they didn't know better, and they're so desperate that they'll do it. Yeah. Because I already know.
And then the car dealership took advantage of them. We get it.
Right. I would already know that the loan was going to get bought at $15,000. I already know that it's going to book for payment at $15,000. So every dollar more that you can get for down payment from these folks was profit. It didn't go to help the customer and bring their payment down. It went towards profit at the dealership.
So why was the dealership squeezing these folks?
Because they could.
Because that's why.
Because that industry vultures on the poor community. And this is where things would be crazy. If you had excuse me, if you had somebody who was a lot of times we'd have customers walk in that had very good credit, right? They might be a local business owner. Sometimes churches would come in and buy the cars for people. We negotiated with them just like you might expect, to negotiate with anybody else.
It's easy to have good credit when you don't spend your own money.
I suppose. And the churches would come in, and that was crazy. Mikey will love this. Churches would come in. I sold many, many BMWs to pastors. The deacons would come in, they do the deal for the pastor. They put in the church's name, pay no tax. Pastor come in, jump in the car, drive off. Right? Oh, the church is buying a car for our pastor. So
not getting my money for that no more.
But then like if someone came in who was good credit and they were looking at the exact same car that a person with secondary credit was looking at, they're paying a substantially different price. And the way that you would approach the deal as the desk person, not the salesperson, the desk person, the guy who sits at the desk. In secondary, they call it the tower, right? So they'd be like, they would literally run the people's credit first. And if it was good credit, they'd treat them like a human being. And if it was bad credit, they'd be like, well, we'll sell them a car, but we're going to crack them. And if you'd walk out of there with, say, making $1,000 profit off of, Joe business owner, that was fine. Good sale. You did a good job. You sold that car. But if you only made $1,000 off of a secondary credit customer, most of the time they wouldn't even take the deal. And if they did, they'd pay the salesman like a mini deal, like $100 commission, because they'd be like, well, but it wasn't. You should have made more money off that guy.
Do better. Be better.
Do better next time.
Be worse.
Right? And by do better, they meant do worse. And that was the thing that I've realized over time. And like, it was it's very troubling because you've got these situations where you literally treated people differently based on a number that was attached to their name.
Yeah, but that number was represented by money.
The ability to make money off of someone, right?
So it's
And
okay
the less
because
educated
capitalism.
they were. And then when these folks would default on these loans, the dealership was innocent standby, an innocent bystander. It had nothing to do with. They had nothing to do with it. The banks know, and the banks knew what was going on. The banks were not benevolent in this, And the sad part is like most of the time when people we would call it get bought. We got them financing. And it might have been a case where they went to 2 or 3 other dealerships and they threw them out. Now that's true too. Like if you have bad credit and you would go to say like, Joe Schmo Chevrolet, where they're used to dealing with, good credit people, they'll throw people out. They're like, I'm not going to deal with this shit. They just tell them to fucking leave. I'm sorry, we can't help you. So if someone goes to 3 or 4 different dealerships, they start to become desperate. So then when they come to you, you look like a miracle worker. And they would thank you profusely for fucking them over.
That's depressing.
It is.
Happened to me twice.
It happened to it is currently happening to my mom. Like she bought a car like that, and I mean they took her for way too much money.
Oh, and on top of that, a lot of these folks, now this part I think was illegal, and not every salesman was doing it, but there were a couple of guys there who, like, they would not only sell the car, they'd also sell the car insurance, because they were like insurance. They work in the insurance business also, and they'd be like, "Oh, don't worry, I got you for the insurance."
Yep.
And then they'd just completely crack these people on the car insurance too.
Yep. And then when you can't afford it, and then you get pulled over because you have a new car and you're black.
Yep.
Now your insurance is expired. We called and checked, your insurance is expired. Yeah, because
you never got your Volkswagen from me. Volkswagen was different though. Hold on.
I haven't really said a whole bunch, so that if I could.
I was talking to Lamar.
Thanks. Thanks, Dutch. Thanks. Podcast, by the way. And it was times like those where it's like my insurance was more than my payment. Like my insurance for my Dodge Neon was $250. I have no moving violations, no tickets, no nothing.
Damn.
Perfectly clean. $250 on a fucking Neon. It goes like 80 miles an hour. Like, what do you? It's as big as a fucking bar of soap. What?
Oh, you didn't get that SRT?
I had a SXT, which just had like the nicer trim to it, but there was no engine improvements. It was labeled as a sports car. I'm like, this is bullshit.
They threw the spoiler on it, and you got tricked thinking you was buying the SRT.
Why? Okay, I've let too much go. Can you not speak on people without demeaning them? Are you going through something right now?
Who's demeaning? That is absolutely the culture in the car business. You put a GT on a fucking, that was the joke in the business. You put a GT on a car, that meant you got tricked into buying that car. Because the GT didn't really mean shit. Unless it was a Mustang.
But that's not what you said. So I get what you're saying, but that's not what you said. So again, are you doing okay? Because you've just been lashing out lately, and I'm not sure why. Do you need help from me to do anything?
Do I need help from you to do anything?
Because you're lashing out a lot, and I'm trying to be patient with you.
I feel like I'm lashing out at you personally, because I'm not. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to do that.
I'll see you later, dude.
I am using the so okay.
Hi.
This is the opposite of last week. But I am using the literal terminology that people use within the industry. They would purposely trick people into thinking that they were getting something better than they were getting. You know, you go for here's a perfect example. You would take a base model Neon. That was the example that he gave, right?
Uh-huh.
An SE or an SXT Neon. You'd go put a spoiler on it and throw fog lights in it and put some striping on it that costs you $16. The spoiler costs you about $80. Sometimes they'd put different rims on it, and then they'd charge you what's called an addendum, right? And they'd mark all this stuff up so that it would cost more than the premium version did.
Okay.
Right? If that makes any sense. But it was just extra excess profit. And then they would sell it to people. So people were thinking that they were getting more car than they were getting.
Now, I may have lost the thread, but are these secondhand cars or are these new cars?
No. This would be something that would happen with new cars.
Okay, because so the last car I bought was from Subaru, and
Right.
I have a Subaru. The fuck is it called? A Forester, and I bought it new. It was a 2016. I bought it in 2016 or 2017, and it did have like several packages. Like, you know, there was the base model.
It was a brand new car?
Brand new, yeah.
Yeah. So here's the way that you quantify this, if I'm understanding your question correctly. The regular window sticker of the car is called the Maroni label.
Okay.
Okay. That is the one where underneath it comes on the car from the manufacturer.
Right.
The dealers cannot change Maroni labels. They're legally, under federal law, they have to display the original Maroni label from the car visibly either in the front window or on the back window. And it has to be on the back window or the front, or sometimes customers will rip it off. So you could legally put it on the front dashboard, right? But 9 times out of 10, it's going to be on the back window. I forget if it was the left or right. I think it was the left. And you have to display that there. But you can tell the Maroni label because it'll say the destination charge, which these days is usually around $800 to $1,100. And then below that, you'd see the MSRP. So you can Google a Maroni label and see what that looks like. I'll pull one up here real quick.
Are the dealers the ones adding stuff onto the car? Is that what you're saying? Because like the Forester I bought like had the heated seats but didn't have the automatic lift gate in the back. Like, is that the dealership doing that or is that the manufacturer?
Okay, it could be either one. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. All right, so this is oops, wrong screen. That's the dig. Let's share the appropriate screen. All right, so this is, I just Googled Maroni label. This is a Maroni label, right? So like
okay.
this, you'll see something like this. These are Maroni labels. Every single car has one. So we'll see if we can find one that we can zoom in on here. Maybe this one. Oh, this is a really small one. Oh no, you should be able to see this. Look at, I hate when websites do this. They like pop this big fucking ad in there and I can't. All right, so here we go. So can you see this good enough? So
yeah.
So the here I'll do this. This will probably be better. Because this is a good question. So I'm gonna share my other screen here instead of this screen. we'll go back and we'll share the screen. All right, so now you should be able to see this bigger. So I should be able to zoom in and out on it.
Oh yeah, there you
so
go.
this is a Moroni label. So it's going to start out up here. You're going to have the manufacturer, right? It's going to give you the color, all that type of stuff. You're going to have standard equipment on the left. And then you're going to have at the top here a manufacturer suggested retail price. This is the retail price that you're going to see on the website for Honda up here. Can you see my mouse?
Yeah.
So, okay. So underneath that, you're going to have packages that are OEM added, right? So they're from the manufacturer installed equipment, OEM equipment.
Okay.
This particular vehicle, it's Sirius satellite radio and roadside assistance, which is pretty boilerplate. You might also say on here, have another line here that says leather heated seats.
Okay.
Right. And then that might add on $1,400. In the old days, you'd have like navigation system, $4,000. Nobody buys one with nav anymore because now you get Apple CarPlay. But so
Google Maps. Don't forget about Google Maps.
Or don't forget about Google Maps, right? So you'll have all of this stuff down here. Sometimes you might say this car has 18-inch rims instead of 17-inch rims, right? So like that was something we did with Volkswagen a lot. And Volkswagen, we knew that people didn't like the rims on certain cars, so we'd always order our cars with the better rims, and they sold better. But these things would be from the manufacturer. So as you can see here, it's destination and handling. Always right below the destination handling will be the total vehicle price. This is the price, the sticker price of the car. So word to the wise. Generally, if the invoice price for a car is going to be available online. So like you can go to Edmunds.com and find out precisely what the invoice price for this car is. It's going to be the invoice price based on this plus anything that would be here. Not including the destination charge. That is different everywhere because that is a geographic price that is based on the geography.
That's based on how far they have to ship the car.
Right. Generally, these cars come in at the Port of Houston. And you know, so like with Volkswagen, they always came into Houston. Some cars come into LA, Long Beach, other cars come in from other ports. So the further the dealership is away, the more it's going to be. Generally, they're not too far off, right? Like, so like if the dealership in Houston isn't going to have a destination charge of like $50. They're still, they might be $910 compared to $950. All right. So now what you are talking about would be an addendum. So what it sounds like what you're talking about is an addendum. An addendum is dealer installed. So not installed at the.
Would a sunroof be like dealer installed, or is that manufacturer?
Very frequently.
Really?
Very frequently, but usually not unless a customer requested it. So for example, let's say that you came in and you were buying name a car.
Let's say like oh man, fucking cars. Let's say a Ford F-150.
Okay. So a Ford F-150, in order to put a sunroof on it, it'd have to be an extended cab, or you can't put a sunroof on a.
Oh yeah, I guess
the regular cab car.
Well then
you can certainly. But you can put it on an extended cab, right? Like, so let's say you're buying an extended cab Ford F-150. Actually, that's a good example because very infrequently are they going to come with a sunroof,
right?
But you're like, you know what? I really want a sunroof. So the dealer will be like, all right, I'll put a sunroof on it for you. It's going to be $695 or whatever the price is.
Yeah.
Right. That's probably low. It'd probably be closer to like, $900. It costs probably about $350 to install a sunroof on a car. Now, this is something that doesn't probably happen that much anymore, but when I was selling cars in the early 2000s, it happened a lot. Big difference between a sunroof and a moonroof.
Yes.
We'd be like, oh yeah, we'll put the moonroof in. People didn't realize moonroofs don't open.
Yeah, there's just a top window.
Yes. And often they didn't come with the cover. So if the sun's right there, you know, you might have some problems. Moonroofs don't slide. Sunroofs open, moonroofs don't. Moonroofs might tilt up, but that's the extent of it, right? And it's usually by hand. A sunroof is almost always going to have a button. Okay. You don't see this, I don't think, as much anymore because the price of sunroofs has come down, but it was a huge thing back in the day. Another big thing back in the day was keyless entry, which you'll never see that as an add-on anymore, and remote start. I would imagine once in a while
remote start's real big in New England because people don't like waiting in their cold cars.
Right. And we used to put remote start on cars all the time in Chicago. But again, nowadays, a lot of cars come with that. It's not that it's cheap. The manufacturers realized that they were letting dealerships make the money on this. So they're like, fuck you, we're going to make the money on it. Right. So now what I am talking about, though, is different. So let's say that I was going to build let's say that I was going to take this car and now I'm going to put a addendum on it. Right. So I come over here and I make another, I put another sticker in the window right here. Right. And I'm just going to do this in a cheap way. I'm going to say, I'm going to write in here, spoiler. $950. Rally wheels. $2,500. You know, fog lights. We call them like sport fog lights, sport lights. Come up with some crazy name. $200. And then you put a new vehicle price at the bottom of this. So that's not illegal and sometimes not unethical. But in the case that Mikey was referring to, it was done deceptively. And that's where I think the miscommunication came in, because they would literally they would take like a SE, which usually stands for special edition, which usually means base.
Mm-hmm.
Volkswagen was one of the few car companies that literally was honest and called their base models base. So usually they'd call it like the SE edition, right? Or the special edition or the limited edition or something like that. Some just make it sound, because it was special edition, it was cheaper, but you'd be like, oh, you know, I want to get, I know that GT has the, you know, the turbocharged V6. So they'll make it look like it's a turbocharged V6, but the turbocharged V6 might only be this much money. But when I add, you know, it might, or let's say that the V6 engine, it would be like, say, 43.8 for the GT. Well, with all this other stuff I'm throwing in there, it's well above that now, right? So you're thinking you're getting, people would literally think they'd be getting the better car, but not getting the better car. This almost never happens with used cars. It could, but it's rare because, again, used cars are going to be sold by the loan to value ratio rather than the MSRP. And generally the dealership is going to get, you can find the invoice price on this car. Like, you can look up on Edmunds.com the invoice price, or at least you used to be able to. You can look up the invoice price on any car out there. It's generally well-known information. Again, minus destination, because that's different everywhere. So in addition to the invoice price, the dealer gets 3% what they call holdback. So every single car, MSRP minus destination times 3% is the dealer holdback. 100% of cars, every single brand. So if you want to know how much dealer holdback, additional profit the dealership is making, it is whatever the MSRP is of the car minus destination times 3%.
So the dealer's making an extra 3% on every car they sell.
Well, you can negotiate the holdback if you go in and tell them about it.
Right.
They're like, look, I know you make 3% holdback on this car. I want half. What I do is I go into dealerships. I go, look, hey, I sold cars for 7 years. I know the business. I want half the holdback. And that's generally fair. Like in this market right now today, they'll tell you go fuck yourself because cars are scarce. They're
Right.
just putting market allowances on cars right now where like, oh, you know, it's sticker price plus $5,000 because I can. Right. But I'm not talking about this market. I'm talking about in a normal market where like it's competitive and like, you know, they're worried that you might go to another dealership and check over there. Right. Most of the time dealerships will take half the holdback. Or, you know, if it's a super expensive car, like a BMW, they might tell you go fuck yourself. Cause like BMW, like I'm not discounting a fucking BMW, right? Like
right.
You're buying a $120,000 car. Generally speaking, if you're going to buy a BMW, Mercedes, Lexus, your discount's going to be between 3 to 5% off of sticker. Other than that, they're just not going to deal with you. But that's very select. I'm talking about my situations, and I'm talking about is more like your Chevy, Honda, Ford, Toyota, Volkswagen,
right,
Subaru dealers, right?
Not luxury vehicles, like standard vehicles.
That's your luxury vehicles, with the exception of Cadillac, which is very much treated like a standard car. With the exception of Cadillac and Lincoln, which I don't even know if Lincoln's still around. I think they are. Oh yeah, Matthew McConaughey's in a Lincoln. That's right. They're all right.
Yeah. They've revamped their whole like image.
So, and again, I've been out of this business for 10 years, so some of this stuff might not be necessarily true anymore. But like, I do know that BMW though they still fall into that, like you're going to be somewhere between 3 to 5% off of the sticker price and maybe 500 over sticker, depending on how popular the car is.
Right.
Right. So, but the situation Mikey was talking about though, was people got tricked into doing that. And I understand he thought I was saying something I didn't say. We'll have to figure it out later. And after last week, anyway, you know, so, we'll talk about that in a minute. But the point is, it was something that happened to people all the time.
Right.
So they would trick you. That was really the and maybe what I didn't explain well enough was the slang term in the car business was you got tricked. GT got tricked into buying a car that you thought was something different than what it was. Right. So, it's now there are 95% of the cars that I sold. You know, I think people got a pretty decent deal on them. It's just in the secondary market, they never did. And I think that was kind of the fucking point to this whole conversation, is that people were treated differently based on the perception of their creditworthiness.
Right.
You know, and the fact that you have people paying exorbitant interest rates, which sometimes with these deep secondary companies, there's a difference between secondary and deep secondary. Secondary is like, I got a 580, I'm late on a couple credit cards. Deep secondary is like, you're a 425, you got a repo in your background, you know, you might have had a bankruptcy 6-7 years ago. That's deep secondary. The bank is expecting to repossess your car. So one of the things I didn't get to though, is that these lenders would then charge an acquisition fee for the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So the acquisition fee, most people are familiar with acquisition fees. You are very familiar with an acquisition fee if you lease your cars, because
right, yeah.
every lease has an acquisition fee, right? So the acquisition fee generally on a lease is $595 to $995 ballpark. It's a one-time fee. It's just a fee. You're acquiring the car. That's the fee. But the acquisition fee on a secondary loan is basically the bank doing this particular math. Now, I gave you the dealership math, but the lender also had their own math. So they and one of the reasons why I would say, like, you got to get as much down payment as possible, because when, like in the situation I made with Mikey, I bought the car for 10, it books for 15. He had $4,000 down, so I sold it for 19. I know the bank is going to charge a $2,000 acquisition fee out of that, and technically that's coming out of my profit. So I have to make up for as much of that as possible. So the bank was basically saying, okay, we're going to assume this car is going to be repossessed. So we want to make sure that, and I'm paraphrasing this here, this may not be different for different places, so this is not, exact for every single bank. But the idea in general is, when I go take the car back, it's going to be worth X dollars at auction. This is what we paid for it. This is 10% profit. I'm going to assume they're going to make one payment. So they would take one payment plus the acquisition fee plus the amount that they think they'll get for the car once they go repo it and sell it at auction. Right. And in some cases they were right, but they were right because you gouged someone.
Right.
And it's not the bank's fault that the customer didn't pay their bills before, but it is the fault of this fucking society that allows companies to capitalize on people, and not have any safety nets in place to look out for consumers.
Right. And I get the general feeling that, like, the car sales industry is always, like, felt kind of scummy to consumers. And that's why a lot of those online places took off, like CarMax and stuff like that. Like,
Right.
You're buying a car based on findings on the internet instead of someone trying to sell you a car. I mean, CarMax and all those other places are still trying to sell you a car. It's just an algorithm instead of a person.
More or less. And like so the old stereotype of the car salesman, though, is not accurate anymore. So, like, have you ever seen that Kurt Russell movie, Used Cars?
Yeah.
Right. So, like, there's another movie called Suckers that if you ever watch it, it's got Lori Loughlin in it, from Full House, and the one who scammed the universities later, and and she's in this movie. Suckers is a great sales movie, by the way. It's up there with Boiler Room, and Wolf of Wall Street. It's movies that salespeople watch.
Right.
Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, like, there are movies that are popular with salespeople. Those are the movies. Suckers, Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross.
Well, I think you have to learn the coffee is for closers speech in
Coffee
business
is for
school.
closers in yes, the Alec Baldwin speech. So Suckers is right up there with it. Like, if you ever go someday, watch the beginning of Suckers. Right, it's on YouTube. You can watch it, I think, for free.
Okay.
And it's just tantalizing. But it's also but it's different, though. That's more accurate than what, like, the Kurt Russell Used Cars, where, like, he's putting bubble gum on shit,
Right.
old shit together, and like, that does not happen anymore. And the reason why it doesn't happen, at least ever in my experience, is because the banks will not give a loan to someone with bad credit on a car that they think is going to break down, because they know for a fact that they're not going to be able to recoup any money. They want that car to run at least for a year or two so that they can make their payments back. Right. So usually when you go in to buy a car with secondary credit, like, let's say, for example, that you went in to a dealership and you have really bad credit, and you're thinking to yourself, I can afford a $12,000 car at 20% interest. And you look and you're like, hey, I need an SUV. I got kids. I'm going to go buy this Jeep Cherokee with 110,000 miles. This like right now, what's it, 2023? So I'm going to go get this 2014 Jeep Cherokee with 120,000 miles. It's 12 grand. I can afford that. You're going to go to the dealership. They're going to tell you, sorry, you don't qualify for that car. And they're not lying because you don't. Right. Because the bank's not going to buy you on this is the bank's problem. The bank's not going to give you a loan on that because they're going to be like, well, $120,000 car is going to break down, so you're not going to pay your bill. They need to buy a car with 40,000 miles or less. That would be their stipulation, right? So like the less miles that a car had, the better.
Right.
So, it's the old Kurt Russell tropes, like with people sticking bumpers back on with fucking Elmer's glue. That might have happened. That might have happened in the 70s and 80s, but that definitely wasn't happening you might have like some more benign stuff, like, with cigarette hole in the seat and they're putting like a, piece of tape, stuff in a cotton ball in there or something like that. Maybe that, or something like that. But like, you're not going to have like, the engine's not going to be like glued together, because if the car because now we have lemon laws. You can't sell a car unless you do an inspection on that car.
Right.
Because the bank wants to see the inspection. It's called it's called the POI. So you have to POI a car when you get it. Point of inspection, I think it's called. So you have to do this on the car, especially, and it's always a good idea if you're going to buy a used car to buy a certified car. Because certification is going to go through certain manufacturers. The manufacturer is going to set the stipulations for what that car is going to have to go through in order to become certified.
Right.
And then they'll give you like a powertrain warranty, which of course is useless. It covers nothing. The engine's not going to break down these cars these days. Your water pump's going to break down, not your engine.
Yeah, not 100,000 miles or whatever they give you.
And super last thing, don't buy the extended warranty, especially if it's a named apparel warranty. There's two different kinds of warranties. There are comprehensive warranties and there are named apparel warranties. A named apparel warranty is exactly what it sounds like. It says, I cover this, and this.
Right.
A comprehensive warranty says, I cover everything except for anything it doesn't cover. Usually brakes, headlights, taillights, that, wear and tear items, gaskets maybe. But a gasket's a big one because in order to change a gasket, you got to pull the engine out. That's 4 or 5 hours of labor.
Yeah, right. I experienced that with the food truck. They had to replace all the head gaskets because they were leaking like crazy. That was expensive.
Yeah, and a check engine light, Hellbound just put a comment in there about a check engine light. So a check engine light, 9 times out of 10 is an O2 sensor.
Oh yeah, it's like every check engine light I've ever had when they scanned it. Yeah, it was a broken O2 sensor. Or a low voltage O2 sensor.
Right. 99% of the time, the check engine light is not a big deal. Sometimes it is, but oftentimes the check engine light is, especially on German cars. German cars are notorious for having O2 sensors go out. So. But anyway, that's anything to add or questions or anything like that before I wrap this up?
I mean, boy, the automobile sales industry is awful. But I mean, it's not anything that I wouldn't expect from.
The problem is it's legal.
Yeah, that is the problem, and once again, it's not anything I wouldn't expect from America. Like,
and I don't mean to step on you, but like, look. It's generally not even the salesperson's fault. they are entering into a job. They're usually just some dude who went to go get a job, and the dealership is like, "I'll teach you to sell cars."
Right.
And then they fall into this culture, which is the culture is a competition between salespeople to see who can make the most money.
Right. I mean, that's anything though. Like, there's a culture like that in fucking selling houses. Like, that's the same thing. Is, you know, you gotta, so the person who sells the most houses wins, or the most valuable houses. Like, it's the same thing in, you know, any sort of sales driven, even down to like, I don't know. I've been in a few of those environments too, where it's like, oh well, you're the best employee if you sell the most things. You know, it's the profit driven stuff is crazy. And I have quarrels with people. Even the partner on my food truck is always like, you know, let's see how much money we can get out of people. I'm like, dude, it's grilled cheese. We're already charging a premium because it's a food truck. Like, you're not going to sell a $10 grilled cheese to a guy and have him see value in it. So I understand not trying to be in a profit driven motive, because yes, the existence of a company is to make money, but you're not supposed to take people for everything they're worth.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of cases in America, it's just legal to do so.
Yeah. And that's why a lot, like, I have a lot of, you know, I don't really, I wouldn't really call it guilt, but it kind of is. Like, it's unsettling to think like that I was a part of that culture. And at the time, it was just what you're expected to do. Every single other person of every race and ethnicity was doing it. You know, you had, like, obviously these dealerships are in generally areas where it's people of color, and they'd hire people of color, and they'd hire pastors from, you know, black churches to come in there and screw their own congregation over.
Right.
It sounds unbelievable, but I watched it happen with my own eyeballs. Like, the congregation members would come in and they'd be like, "Where's pastor? He's not here today. He's off. Can I help you?" "Nope, I'll come back tomorrow." And then pastor would rake his own congregation over the coals.
Right.
You know, so it's like, so I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is just how they're doing. And then the mentality of the salesman was, look, these people ain't going to pay their fucking bills anyway, so who fucking cares? The only one who's going to lose is the bank, right? So we had almost this, like, hey, screw the bank idea. You know what I mean? That was rampant among salespeople. And it wasn't always about screw the consumer. It was about fuck the bank, because they're not going to pay the bill anyway.
Well, I mean, it was the same thing with the subprime mortgage industry. It was I mean, the banks said screw the customer. They over leveraged themselves, and then they gave a mortgage to anyone who could sign it. And, you know, and then they go, when everything falls apart, they go to the government and be like, "Please, sir, may I have some money, sir?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they couldn't package those loans up and sell them, because they thought they were good. They had been historically so sound to package together and sell off to stockholders and investors. And then they said, hey, well, look, these aren't so reliable anymore. So we're not going to, they're not making the same rates. They started to sell for less. And then when they start to bundle them together and they're getting less money than what they invested, they can't sell them. Now they're stuck with all that debt.
Yeah.
Our industries they don't want that.
And then,
you know, and
nobody was held accountable.
And well, nobody was held accountable for it. You're right. But also, just another quick tidbit about the car business. Dealerships don't own the fucking cars on their lot. They finance them too.
Right.
So there's something called floor plan. And, like, so they're paying an interest rate to hold those cars there. So if you can find a car that's been there longer, like, you can walk around the lot generally and look at the stock numbers and kind of go in reverse chronology and say, okay, this car has been here longer, and it's a red Toyota Camry, but this one's been here longer. You know, you can see the manufacture date on the cars if you open the door. usually that correlates with how long it's been on the lot. It may just be that one got passed over. You might be able to get a better deal on it. So,
because they don't want to pay the interest on that car anymore.
Because they're paying interest on that car, and they're like, they get like a certain amount of days for free.
Right.
So like once they start paying on it, they're like, I got to get rid of that car. So it doesn't happen often that you'll find those situations, but because usually dealers are smart enough to say this guy wants a red Camry, they're going to go get the oldest red Camry they have. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's the same to the customer, right? You're still getting the same warranty. It's just they happen to get that one 2 months before. You know what I mean? But sometimes you'll get one that slips past the goaltender, and maybe it had, maybe they were about to sell it and the battery died or something like that. So they had to get a different one or whatever, and then put a new battery in the car.
Right.
And the biggest racket with dealerships is their service departments.
Oh my God.
Because
that is the worst.
6 hours to wait for an oil change for 4 times the price.
Yeah, I did because we bought our car new, so had to do like the 30,000 mile service and then the whatever. The first tune up the car had at like 30,000 miles. I went there, waited forever, and after they did whatever they did, it was like an oil change, and they changed a few filters or whatever. And the lady was like, "That'll be $500," and I was like, "500 real dollars? Like, why is it $500 for the work that you did?"
Yeah, the car's under warranty, but they don't tell you nowadays that they change. See, they do things to increase the back end cost, because the front end cost is competitive, but the back end cost is not always as competitive.
Right.
So like I went through this recently. I bought a Nissan Altima a couple years ago, and one of the things that I looked at was that it had a sealed transmission. Well, this is where my experience worked against me, because in my mind, a sealed transmission means you don't ever have to change the fucking fluid on it because it's sealed.
Mm-hmm.
Usually a sealed transmission, you have to flush out the tranny at about 100K, 120K.
Right.
Not my Nissan Altima. They wanted me to flush the tranny at fucking 15,000 miles.
Oh my God.
$299. I'm like, fuck you. I'm not fucking doing that. Now, the flip side of that coin, I did not do it. I am literally gambling that my car is not going to need any major work during the manufacturer's warranty period because they won't cover it.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to have to assume that the engine and transmission aren't going to fail, because you have to fall in line with what the manufacturer's warranty is. This is one of the things that helped Kia and Hyundai to take off back in the day. But then people got wise to it because they were like, well, Kia and Hyundai were both the same company. They said, well, we know people aren't going to do their maintenance, so who cares if we offer a 10-year, 100,000 mile warranty? If they miss an oil change, it's done.
Right. Yeah.
Now that changed. It became less strict over time, I think, as they got probably not even sued, just probably the public got wise to it. So then they actually started building good cars. So, and they do. Hyundai builds a really good car now. Like, I'm not lying. Hyundai builds a super really good car. It's every bit as good as a Honda in my eye. So, it's the only thing that's different is the perceived retail value.
Right.
Of a resale value, I mean. So anyway, I'll let you wrap up.
I mean, yeah, I think we're good. I think, it was interesting to find out all the terrible things that salespeople do. And the next time I buy a car, I'm gonna look for that shit.
That's the hope. And I mean, I'll just close with this. And I say this to every salesman I deal with when I buy a car. I have no interest in stealing the car from them. I want them to make money. I just want it to be fair.
Yeah.
So you're far better off buying a new car than you are buying a used car, in my opinion. Unless it's like $30,000 less than a new one.
Right.
And it's an outrageously like let's say you're looking at a new Toyota Camry, just pick a car, and like a brand new one is $34,000, and you're going to pay 2.9%, and a used one is with 12,000 miles, basically the same car, year older, is $17,000, and you're going to pay 6%. It's probably worth it to buy the used car. But most of the time, you don't see that. You see, like, especially with trucks, you see like new Ford F-150, 63,000, year old one, 52,000. So like, and it's got 45,000 miles on it. So you're like, I might as well just buy the fucking new one and get the better interest rate.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
you'll always get a better interest rate on a new car. So
yeah. And I mean, the problem, at least in the current market, is that the interest rates have been going up because the prime rates have all been going up.
mhm.
So I'm sure that the banks are less willing to give out loans, and it makes harder for the dealerships to sell cars because they want to jack up the interest rates to give out a loan.
And houses too. Like we're selling right now. We pay on our house, on our mortgage, we pay about just under 3%.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what ours
the
is too. I think it's just over 3%.
Yeah, we're at like 2.895% or 2.915% or something like that. The house we're going to buy, it's going to be 5%.
Yeah,
If not 6%, and that's conventional. So
when just before the pandemic started and the economy crashed, we were looking to refinance our house, get a
you're right,
lower
Lamar, there were
interest rate.
class actions.
And then everything happened. The Fed raised the interest rates through the roof, and we were like, well, I guess we can't refinance because we don't want a 7% interest rate on our house.
Right.
When we're paying 3%, like there's no reason to refinance. Even though our house basically doubled in value because of the pandemic, because everyone from New York City moved into my neighborhood and drove up the property values of everything.
Yeah, unless you're going to buy a house and sell your house and move into an apartment, but even then, that's going to go up. Like the only real reason to do it would be like if you have $40,000 in credit card debt, you're paying 30% on, then maybe then maybe the 7% makes sense.
Yeah,
but outside of that, it's problematic. So and all of this is upheld by our form of capitalism.
Capitalism. We salute you.
I love it. So there's the dig.